Today, we're going to take a look inside a really specific kind of mind. We're talking about an inner world, a mental architecture that just perceives and processes things in a way that's, well, fundamentally different. It's as powerful as it is complex. You know the type, right? Maybe it's a friend, a coworker, or even you. They just seem to pick up on things super fast. They notice these tiny little details that everyone else misses, and their mind, it's like it just never, ever stops. And it turns out, there's a reason for that. Only about 2% of the population actually thinks this way. It's a pretty uncommon mental wiring, which, goes a long way in explaining why people who have it can sometimes feel so different. And this is really important. This isn't about luck or just being smart in the traditional sense. We're talking about a recognized psychological profile, a completely distinct way of thinking, feeling, and really experiencing the world around you. Okay, so this right here clears up one of the biggest myths. When we talk about this, we are not talking about being gifted in that old school way of, straight A's and high test scores. No, this is about the very fabric of how a person processes reality itself. So let's dive into the first pillar of this whole mental architecture, what you could call the emotional amplifier. Because for these minds, that intense intellect is almost always matched by an equally intense emotional life. And that emotional depth is a real double-edged sword. I mean, on the one hand, feeling happiness and sadness so much more strongly gives you this incredible capacity for empathy. You can understand people on a really deep level. But on the other hand, that same intensity can make just day-to-day life feel completely overwhelming, and that can lead to a really profound sense of loneliness. Now, that emotional side is paired with a second, equally powerful component, the analytical engine. This is all about a mind that is just fundamentally driven by curiosity, by this insatiable need to understand how everything works. And you can actually see a clear cycle here. It starts with just refusing to accept things at face value. That leads to questioning, well, pretty much everything. And that fuels a constant state of analysis, which in turn creates this internal drive for perfection, this need to meet a standard that's often impossibly high. And this is the result. When you're constantly driven by that intense analytical engine and you're holding yourself to this impossible standard, it's no surprise that your own worst critic is often you. This kind of perfectionism can absolutely fuel incredible success, but man, it carries a heavy internal cost. So when you put those first two traits together, the super intense emotions and the constant analysis, it naturally leads to this third part, the social experience. And for a lot of people, that experience is feeling like an outsider. This really gets to the heart of that feeling of isolation. It's not about thinking you're better or worse than anyone else. It's just a fundamental mismatch. When your mind is wired to crave depth and meaning, all the small talk and surface-level conversations can just feel empty, and that makes it really hard to connect with people. So, what's really going on here? What's behind the intense emotions, the constant questioning, that feeling of being on the outside? Well, it seems to come down to the very wiring of the brain, the architecture itself. The key idea here is something called multidimensional thinking. See, their brains don't just work faster. They work deeper. They see all these unique connections that aren't obvious to everyone else. It's where one single thought can spiral into 10 different avenues to explore. And the result of that? A mind that you can't just switch off. It is always running, always analyzing, always imagining. And that brings us to what is really the central theme of this entire profile. Every single one of these unique traits is both a gift and a weight. It's this duality that really defines the whole experience. Just look at this. That emotional intensity, it's the gift of deep empathy, but it's also the weight of feeling overwhelmed. That constant thinking, it fuels incredible creativity, but it's also just mentally exhausting. And perfectionism? Yeah, it can drive you to achieve amazing things, but it's also a fast track to burnout and relentless self-criticism. So at the end of the day, we really need to redefine what it means to have a mind like this. It has absolutely nothing to do with external things like grades or awards. It's entirely about the internal experience, how you feel, how you think, and the incredible depth with which you see the world. And that really just leaves us with one final question to think about. If any of this resonated with you, that emotional intensity, the constant questioning, that feeling of being an outsider, what might that